Alyssa wasn't supposed to be home that early. Her shift at the hospital had been cut short, and all she wanted was a hot shower and maybe a quiet dinner with her husband. She parked in the driveway, noticing another car already there. At first, she thought maybe David had company, maybe a friend or business partner. But the moment she opened the front door, her world stopped. There, in the middle of her living room, was a woman she had never seen before, standing barefoot on the rug Alyssa had picked out last summer. She was arranging flowers in a vase like she owned the place. And right beside her, a small dog barked, running around like it had lived there forever. Alyssa froze, gripping the door handle. She scanned the room and saw it, the woman's coat on the couch, shoes by the door, and even a suitcase half open, spilling clothes onto the floor. Clothes that didn't belong to her. What is going on here? Alyssa's voice shook, but it carried through the room. The woman turned, smiling nervously as if caught doing something slightly embarrassing. Oh, you must be Alyssa. David mentioned you might come home earlier than planned. Mentioned her? Alyssa's stomach dropped. And then, before she could even process the insult in that sentence, David walked out of the kitchen, holding 2 coffee mugs like it was the most ordinary day in the world. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look guilty. Instead, he gave Alyssa a calm, almost rehearsed expression. Alyssa, I was going to talk to you tonight. This is Marissa. He placed the mugs on the table, completely ignoring the storm building in his wife's eyes. Alyssa looked from him to the stranger, and then to the dog now chewing on one of her slippers. Her throat tightened. She couldn't breathe. This wasn't a conversation about cheating, about secrets, about betrayal. It was worse. He had moved her in. Her eyes caught the hallway. Hanging there on the rack was a bright pink jacket she'd never seen before. The guest room door was wide open, showing drawers already stuffed with clothes. There was even a framed photo on the shelf, Marissa's smile next to David's arm around her. Rage and confusion collided all at once. You moved her in? Into our home? Alyssa's voice cracked, but she didn't lower it. David sighed as though she were being unreasonable. Alyssa, let's not make a scene. Things between us haven't been good for a while. I need companionship, and Marissa understands me in ways you don't anymore. The words stung like knives. Alyssa blinked back tears, her chest heaving. Was this real? Was she really standing in her own house, being told she'd been replaced? Her eyes landed on Marissa again. The woman didn't look ashamed. She stood tall, her dog jumping onto Alyssa's couch, pawing at the cushions. It was as if Alyssa was the stranger, intruding on their home. Humiliation poured over her like fire. How could he do this so openly, so carelessly? And more importantly, what was she supposed to do now? Alyssa had always known the meaning of hard work. She grew up in a modest home with her mother, Linda, who raised her alone after Alyssa's father passed away when she was just a child. Life wasn't easy, but Linda taught her to value honesty, loyalty, and family above everything else. Those lessons shaped Alyssa, and when she became a nurse, she carried them into her work and her personal life. She wanted stability, love, and a family of her own. That was why David seemed like a dream when he first came into her life. He was charming, full of energy, and spoke about the future with such excitement. He made her laugh, made her feel seen, and promised her a life where they would build something together. On their first dates, he told her stories about his dreams of owning a business and creating a name for himself. Alyssa admired his passion, and though she knew he didn't have much money, she believed in his vision. When they got married, things weren't perfect, but Alyssa believed they could work through anything. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital while David chased his startup ideas. Many times, her paycheck kept the bills paid while he invested what little they had into his project. Some months were harder than others, but Alyssa never complained. She told herself this was what marriage was about: sacrifice, support, and patience. Linda, however, was never fully convinced about David. She would watch quietly as Alyssa stretched herself thin, working long hours, and then still coming home to cook, clean, and manage everything. More than once, she warned her daughter, Alyssa, that man is too focused on himself. You're giving, but I don't see him giving back. Alyssa brushed it off, insisting that David was under pressure, that one day he would succeed, and they would both enjoy the reward. She wanted to believe love could fix the imbalance her mother noticed. Over time, though, Alyssa began to feel the cracks form. David was no longer the same attentive man she had married. He became distracted, often glued to his phone late at night, or disappearing with excuses about business meetings that seemed to happen more often than actual progress in his work. When Alyssa tried to ask questions, he would turn it around on her, accusing her of not trusting him, of being too controlling. At first, she doubted herself, wondering if maybe she was being paranoid. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The distance between them grew wider. Conversations that used to last hours became short and cold. When she wanted to talk about their future, he dismissed her, saying she was nagging. Sometimes he wouldn't even come home until late, and when she asked why, he would brush her off with vague answers like, "Don't start, Alyssa. You always assume the worst." That was how he made her feel, like she was the problem. Still, Alyssa held on. She remembered all the years she had stood by his side, all the money she had poured into keeping their home steady while he took risks. She thought about the promises he had made, the man she fell in love with, and she told herself she couldn't just walk away. Marriage was supposed to mean commitment, even when it was hard. What Alyssa didn't realize was how much she had already sacrificed. She had put her dreams aside, traveling, going back to school, even simple hobbies she loved, because she wanted to support David. Every part of her life had been shaped around him, and now she was left with the growing fear that none of it mattered to him anymore. By the time the betrayal came into the open, Alyssa was already wounded by years of distance and doubt. Her heart was heavy with confusion, her trust cracked by lies she couldn't quite prove. Yet, despite everything, she still hoped. Hoped that David would remember their beginning, hoped that he would fight for what they had built. She didn't yet know that the man she had believed in so fiercely had already chosen another path, one that would shatter her completely. It started with little things that Alyssa couldn't explain. A faint smell of perfume on David's shirts that wasn't hers. Lipstick stains on a glass left in the sink after he claimed he had been out with friends. A hair tie on the bathroom counter that Alyssa had never seen before. She asked him about it once, her voice soft, afraid of what the answer might be. David didn't hesitate. He looked her straight in the eyes and said, "There's nothing wrong, Alyssa. You're imagining things again. You always think the worst." She wanted to believe him, but her heart refused to rest. The unease followed her everywhere, like a shadow she couldn't shake. At work, she would catch herself staring into space, replaying his words, trying to convince herself she was paranoid. But at night, when he turned his phone face down on the nightstand and drifted off without so much as a good night, she knew deep inside that he was hiding something. One afternoon, when David left his laptop open on the dining table, Alyssa's hands trembled as she hovered over it. She had never been the kind of woman to snoop, but this time she couldn't stop herself. With shaky fingers, she opened his email. What she saw made her blood run cold. There were messages from someone named Marissa, long chains of affectionate words, hotel bookings, photos of them together. In one of the emails, Marissa had written, "Can't wait until I don't have to sneak around anymore. Our home will feel like heaven." Alyssa's knees nearly gave out. She dropped into the chair, clutching the edge of the table. Their home. Her home. She scrolled through more messages, each one stabbing deeper into her chest. David wasn't just cheating. He was planning a life with this woman. She confronted him that night. Her voice was broken, but steady enough to demand answers. "David, who is Marissa? And don't lie to me. I've seen the messages." For a moment, his face went pale. But just as quickly, his expression hardened into something cold and detached. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try to explain. Instead, he shrugged and said, "Alyssa, you've been cold for months. You're always working, always tired. Do you even realize how difficult you've been to live with? Marissa understands me. She makes me feel alive again." Alyssa's heart shattered, but he wasn't finished. He walked away from her trembling body and added casually, "And since you already know, I might as well tell you. Marissa is moving in. She deserves better than to be hidden." The words struck harder than any physical blow. Alyssa's lips parted, but no sound came out. He said it so calmly, as if it were the most natural decision, as if Alyssa's feelings, her sacrifices, her love meant nothing. The next day, Alyssa came home early, and her worst fear became reality. Marissa was there, standing in the living room like she belonged, her dog barking as though it owned the space. Alyssa's eyes swept over the suitcases, the clothes in the drawers, the photos already on display. In that moment, Alyssa felt her world collapse around her. Everything she had built, everything she had given, had been tossed aside. But as the tears burned her eyes, something else began to stir inside her. She didn't crumble to the floor like she thought she might. She didn't beg him to stop or ask him to choose. Instead, she stood in the wreckage of her life and felt a new question rise in her chest. If David could betray her so easily, if he could stand there and blame her for his choices, then maybe she had been blind for too long. Maybe it was time to stop believing his. Every day in the house became a test of Alyssa's strength. She woke up in the mornings to the sound of Marissa's laughter drifting from the kitchen, mixed with the high-pitched bark of that little dog that had taken over the living room. Once, Alyssa had dreamed of mornings with David, maybe children running around, the smell of coffee they brewed together. Now, she had to watch another woman stand in her kitchen, pouring coffee into the mugs Alyssa bought, stirring sugar with her spoons, leaving lipstick marks on glasses that used to be hers. The humiliation was constant. Marissa walked freely through the house, sometimes humming, sometimes singing, as though it were hers. She didn't avoid Alyssa. In fact, she made it worse, greeting her with a smug smile, complimenting her cozy home, while wearing Alyssa's own robe. One afternoon, Alyssa came home from work to find Marissa sitting on her couch, flipping through her old photo albums, the dog curled up on the cushion next to her. She didn't even ask permission. She just acted like it was normal. Alyssa tried to stay strong, but in private she broke down. Many nights, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her face through a haze of tears. She touched her cheeks, swollen from crying, and whispered to herself, "You can't let this destroy you." Some nights she sank to the floor, hugging her knees, feeling like she was disappearing piece by piece. Yet, even as she cracked in those private moments, something inside her refused to let go completely. She was broken, but not finished. Her mother, Linda, saw the change in her daughter right away. When Alyssa finally told her everything, Linda's voice shook with anger. "Alyssa, you cannot live like this. He's disrespecting you in your own home. Pack your things and come stay with me. Leave him." But Alyssa shook her head. "Mom, I made vows, for better or worse. I don't want to throw everything away because of this." "Because of this?" Linda snapped, her eyes wet with fury. "This isn't a mistake, Alyssa. This is cruelty. He's parading another woman in front of you." Alyssa held her mother's hand, her voice breaking. "I know, but I can't just walk away. Not yet." Deep down, it wasn't just vows. It was all the years she had given him, all the money, all the trust. Leaving felt like admitting that it had all been for nothing. Friends reacted in different ways. Some rallied around her, telling her she deserved so much better, that she was strong and should fight back. Others were cruel in their own way, whispering that maybe Alyssa hadn't done enough to keep David's interest, that maybe she had worked too much, cared too much about her career, and lost sight of her husband. Each comment cut her deeper, making her question herself, though she knew in her heart she had given everything she could. Marissa didn't stop pushing. She flaunted herself every chance she got. She left her makeup scattered across the bathroom counter. She borrowed Alyssa's jewelry, sliding rings onto her fingers as though testing how they looked, then smiling when Alyssa noticed. Once, Alyssa walked into her own bedroom and found Marissa sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair with Alyssa's brush. The dog had jumped onto Alyssa's bed, rolling on her sheets, leaving fur everywhere. It was as if Marissa was slowly erasing her existence from the home she had built. But Alyssa wasn't blind anymore. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but her eyes had opened. Quietly, she started paying attention. She saved copies of texts and emails she stumbled upon, snapping pictures with her phone. She began tracking bank transfers she saw on their joint accounts. Money moving in and out for hotel stays, expensive dinners, and even jewelry that Marissa now wore. At night, when she heard David and Marissa whispering in the kitchen, she listened from the shadows, memorizing every word. In those silent hours, Alyssa's mind began to shift. She was still hurting, still humiliated, but now a seed of something new was growing inside her. It wasn't just anger. It was resolve. She knew she couldn't stay broken forever. If David thought she would crumble, if Marissa thought she could take her place without consequence, they were both wrong. Alyssa didn't yet know how she would fight back, but she knew one thing. She was no longer just a victim in her own story. Each tear she shed in the mirror became fuel. Each cruel laugh from Marissa became a spark. Alyssa began to imagine a different ending, one where she wouldn't be the woman left behind, humiliated and forgotten. Quietly, secretly, she started planning. And it happened on a quiet night, when Alyssa came home earlier than usual. She didn't make a sound as she stepped inside, slipping her shoes off at the door. The house was dimly lit, but she could hear voices coming from the dining room. David and Marissa were sitting close together, their tones low, serious. Alyssa froze when she caught the words. "We'll list it next month," David was saying. "The market's hot right now. We'll make enough to buy a new place, something bigger." "Marissa, this house isn't hers anymore. It's ours now." Alyssa's blood turned to ice. She pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Her house. The house she had worked extra shifts to help pay for. The house where she had spent years building a life. And he was planning to sell it without her knowledge, as if she were nothing. Marissa leaned closer to him, her voice soft but eager. "Are you sure she won't fight it? I mean, she still lives here." David chuckled, a cold sound Alyssa barely recognized. "She won't. Alyssa doesn't have it in her. She's too weak, too emotional. She'll cry, maybe yell, but in the end, she'll just give up." That was the moment Alyssa stepped forward. Her voice rang out, sharp and steady. "You really think I'm that weak?" Both David and Marissa spun around, their eyes wide. Alyssa stood in the doorway, her chest rising and falling, but her gaze steady. For the first time, she didn't feel small. David stood quickly, trying to take control of the moment. "Alyssa, this isn't what it sounds like. You're overreacting." She laughed bitterly. "Overreacting? I heard everything, David. You're planning to sell our house, the one I worked for, without even telling me. Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I don't know what you've been doing behind my back?" Marissa shifted uncomfortably, but David stayed firm, his face hardening. "You don't understand, Alyssa. You've been cold, distant. I deserve to be happy. Marissa makes me happy. And as for the house, he smirked, I put it in my name. You have no say in it. Alyssa's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. That's where you're wrong. You think I've been sitting here doing nothing, crying in corners? No, David. I've been preparing. Every shift I worked, every dollar I put into this house. I kept record. Every late-night lie, every transfer of money, every photo you thought I didn't see. I saved them all. David's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? Alyssa straightened, her voice steady, almost calm. I already spoke to a lawyer, a friend of my mother's. Everything you've been trying to hide, I've put in front of someone who knows the law. You can't sell this house without me, and you can't erase the proof of how much I sacrificed for it. You underestimated me, David. That was your mistake. Marissa looked at David, her face pale. You didn't tell me she. Shut up, David snapped, his anger boiling over. He turned back to Alyssa, his voice rising. You think you can stand against me? After everything I've done for you? Don't forget who I am, Alyssa. But Alyssa didn't back away. She took a step closer, meeting his glare with one of her own. Oh, I know exactly who you are. You're a liar, a cheater, a man who thought he could break me and still walk away with everything. But you were wrong. You can't intimidate me anymore. For the first time, David looked unsettled, his face flushed with anger, but beneath it, Alyssa saw something else, fear. He wasn't in control anymore. The room felt charged, heavy with tension. Marissa clutched her dog, looking between them, suddenly realizing she was no longer part of a secret game. The truth was out, and Alyssa wasn't crumbling like David promised she would. Alyssa's voice softened, but it carried a sharp edge. You wanted to erase me, David, but I won't let you. You may have betrayed me, humiliated me, and tried to make me feel small, but this time, I'm not the one losing. You are. David slammed his hand against the table, the sound echoing through the room. You'll regret this, Alyssa. She didn't flinch. She stood tall, her eyes locked on his. No, David. You'll regret ever thinking I was weak. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Alyssa turned and walked out of the room, her steps firm, her hands no longer trembling. Behind her, the world she once knew was falling apart, but ahead of her, she could feel something new, power, control, and the beginning of her freedom. The weeks that followed were not easy, but Alyssa was no longer the same woman who had stood crying in her bathroom. The very next morning after the confrontation, she walked into her lawyer's office with a folder full of evidence. Bank statements, copies of emails, photos of purchases made for Marissa, and even records of her own contributions to the house. Every detail she had carefully gathered became her armor. Filing for divorce was both painful and freeing. She signed the papers with a trembling hand, but her heart felt lighter. For years, she had fought to hold a marriage together, but now she was fighting for herself. Her lawyer assured her that David couldn't simply push her out. The house wasn't his alone. Her financial sacrifices were clear on paper. That gave her confidence. For the first time in a long time, Alyssa felt like she had a voice that could not be silenced. David was furious when the legal notices arrived. He stormed into the living room one night, waving the papers in his hand, accusing Alyssa of betrayal. But this time she didn't shrink back. She simply stood her ground and told him calmly, "You betrayed us first. This is justice, not revenge." Marissa, once so smug, began to lose her shine. The moment she realized lawyers were involved, her confidence cracked. She asked David questions he didn't have good answers to, about the money he had promised, about the house he claimed was theirs. Slowly, Alyssa saw it in her eyes, the same realization she had once faced. David wasn't a man of honor. He was a man who used people until they had nothing left to give. Alyssa watched the tension grow between them. Arguments replaced laughter. The woman who once strutted around Alyssa's home now seemed unsure, quieter, her dog clinging to her side as if sensing her fear. Alyssa almost pitied her, but only for a moment. Marissa had chosen to step into another woman's marriage, and now she was facing the cost of that choice. Through it all, Alyssa found strength in her mother. Linda was by her side every step of the way, attending lawyer meetings, holding her hand during difficult conversations, and reminding her that she was worth more than the pain she had endured. "You are my daughter," Linda would say firmly, "and you are stronger than you think. Don't ever forget that." Little by little, Alyssa started to feel like herself again. She no longer cried herself to sleep. She no longer felt the need to explain or justify. She began to take walks, to cook meals just for herself, to read books she had set aside long ago. Each small step was a reminder that she could live a life without David's shadow over her. The day her lawyer confirmed that she would keep her share of the house and receive fair financial settlement, Alyssa felt a wave of relief she couldn't describe. She had not only survived, she had won. David could no longer erase her sacrifices or her. The humiliation he had tried to trap her in had been turned back on him. Alyssa stood in front of the mirror once more, But this time her reflection was different. Her eyes were clear, her shoulders straight. She smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because she had learned to love herself again. She realized that her dignity, her identity, and The day finally came when Alyssa packed the last of her things. She moved slowly through the rooms, her hands brushing over the furniture, the walls, the memories that once made this house feel like a home. There had been laughter here once, dreams whispered in the dark, promises spoken with love. But those had all been buried under betrayal. Now the house was only a shell, and she no longer felt tied to it. Linda stood by the door, waiting patiently. When Alyssa walked out carrying her final box, her mother reached for her hand. Alyssa took it, their fingers interlacing tightly, as though that simple grip was enough to steady her heart. Together, they stepped outside, the door closing behind them with a quiet finality. For a moment, Alyssa looked back. She didn't see a home anymore. She saw the pain she had endured, the humiliation she had survived. She saw the nights she cried in silence, the mornings she forced herself to smile, and the strength it had taken to rise again. A single tear slid down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was release. "Are you ready?" Linda asked softly. Alyssa nodded. Yes, more than ever. As they walked to the car, Alyssa felt something lift from her shoulders. The betrayal had cut her deeply, but it had not destroyed her spirit. She was walking away with her dignity, her courage, and a new determination burning inside her. In her heart, she made a vow. Never again would she allow anyone to make her feel small, invisible, or unworthy. She would build a new life, one where her voice mattered, where her love for herself was stronger than any lie, stronger than any betrayal. And as the car pulled away, Alyssa didn't look back again. Hey besties. Thanks for watching till the end. Alyssa gave everything to her husband, only to find he moved his mistress and her dog into their home. She faced betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, but rose stronger, fought back, and walked away with her dignity. If you love this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more powerful dramas. See you in the next one. Bye.